Hey guys, it's Stupid Sketcher Guy here with another prehistoric figure review. Now this one is on a figure that I just got today, and is a very exciting new figure from the Mattel line. It is the Jurassic World Amber Collection Velociraptor. Oh yes, I have been very excited for this line of figures, as it is a line of figures that is more professional than the regular Mattel figures, and truly is the closest thing to Kenner quality Jurassic World figures. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first rating we got is the paint job. Now the paint job is a very iffy thing, and is far from the best thing on this figure. But don't get me wrong, it is far from bad, as the paint job is a consistently well-shaded brown, with a couple of defects, like the eye. While the eye is good for the most part, you can clearly see there's a bit of a defect here that kinda ruins the eye. But besides that, the eye is alright. If we go inside the mouth, which, yeah, it has an articulated jaw, you can see that the lower part of the mouth has a more bloody gum, meanwhile the top part is a bit lighter pink. I personally like the gums because even though they are disconnected, I mean there's no way around it, it's a double articulated jaw, I like the difference in color because it's a bit more, it's a realistic and also a cool subtle detail for this figure. Continuing on down, we see some arms, and I think the arms are very iffy because depending on how you pose the arms, it gives a very iffy, inconsistent color scheme, like here, where it's a lot lighter tan than the rest of it, where you see a very clear dark, sharp contrast, and, even when I twist it around like this, there's no real way around it. It's still, bit iffily tanned. I mean, I guess here you can kind of say that, but it does kind of make it harder to pose your figure if there's this kind of, inconsistency in the paint job. But then again, with a figure that's a 360 joint, it's pretty hard to get a consistent color scheme for all angles. But it's still not the best thing to go off of. Now, the best parts of these paint jobs is probably the top part, because it's the darkest and it's the most cleanly detailed and shaded. I'm not really a big fan of the lighter underbelly, but I will definitely get behind this nice dark color scheme. Although this, it just looks like rotten meat. As well as that, the paint job on the tail is very good. It's very well shaded, very well done. It's good. It's good. It helps bring out the figure. So, overall, for the paint job, I would give it a 7 out of 10. Next up, we've got the pose. And the pose is a very, very strong part of this figure. Because while, obviously, it isn't the most posable figure, because there's only so many poses you can do with such hyper-articulation, you can do a lot with this figure. Now I'm just going to make this quick and go over my 3 favorite poses with this figure. So the first one is simple. You just crouch down his legs, and then you splay out his head, and, get it into a good roaring pose, and then make his arms some extra contact points, and put it into this nice freaky crawling position. It's pretty good. It makes it look like it's very stealthy. As well as that, you can switch it from a crawling pose by stretching out his legs and turning it into a very tall, upright, roaring pose. Now, one thing I like about this pose is that you can change how wide his mouth is, so you can determine how much of a roar he's doing. Is he doing a super epic roar, or is he doing just a small roar? And last, but certainly not least, you can keep the upright position, but modify it by changing the arm posture, so that you can turn this Amber Collection Velociraptor into a dead meme. You can turn him into the Velociraptor. Now, out of the poses, this one is by far my favorite, and the one that I display him in whenever I put him on my shelves. So, overall, I would give the posability on this figure a solid 8.5 out of 10. Definitely way better than an average dinosaur figure. Next up is the articulation. Now you might think I've already gone over the articulation by showing all the amazing possibilities you can do with this figure, but there's a bit more to the articulation than just that. How well does the articulation work? So, for the arm articulation, I'd say it works very smoothly. It's a bit loose, and it does feel a bit frail, but it's alright. It's far from the best articulation, and be careful with it. Don't stress the arms too much, because you could unintentionally break it. Down to the legs are a very iffy part, because while you can definitely do a lot with this thing, and a subtle little detail of the leg articulation is that the sickle claws are articulated. Now the other two claws are not articulated, but I gotta admit, this is a really cool feature, and I can't get enough of just moving it up and down. I think it's really fun. It's a fun little thing, and I recommend that anyone who's trying to make a articulated Velociraptor figure add this little detail. It makes a lot of difference. It's very fun to do. The only problem I have with the legs is that the legs can easily get knocked out of a pose. And with this figure's posability, there are only a certain amount of poses you can really do with this figure that actually make it stand. So if you lean it, just right there. If you just pose it just the wrong way, or just touch it a little too much, it'll just lean over. And then there's the tail, which is just a ball joint, really. And yeah, there is also a bendy wire on this tail, but I am strongly against this idea, because the bendy wire only goes to about here, because then after that it's just bendable stuff, and it is very easy to rip the tail, because I can already see the bendy wire poking out of the tail's material. So the bendy wire tail is not well made and can easily destroy the figure. So I'd recommend not using the bendy wire at all and just focus on the ball joint of the tail. And last but certainly not least, you got the head articulation. Now the head articulation is amazing, as the neck can move in a 360 motion, so you can spin and pose the neck any way you like and make it look anywhere. You can make it look over here, you can make it look over here, you can make it look up here, you can make it look down here. You know, the neck posability is very nice, and there's also a small little subtle feature when it comes to posing the head, right over here. It's very nice, and it's a subtle way to help give the neck a small crunch, also meaning that you can really specify where the raptor's looking by lowering and heightening the head, but not necessarily the neck. And as well as that, there is 2 points of articulation on the jaw, meaning that you can lift both the lower and upper jaws to really get a really huge open mouth, and a smaller one for people who are not into the idea of big mouth raptors. So for the articulation, I will give the articulation a solid 7.5 out of 10. And lastly, we got the detail. Now the detail is something that normally is not a good thing on Mattel figures, but this figure is an improvement, because you can really see a lot of really good sculpted in scales all over the face. Now the face is definitely the most detailed part of this figure and the best part. It's well applied, and you can really find every little individually sculpted scale. However, if I have one critique with the sculpt, I'd say that the fact that they didn't do individually sculpted teeth is a bit of a disappointment, because, you know, this is supposed to be an adult collector's line. You'd think that they'd go a little different when it comes to the design of the teeth, but you know what, I'll let it slide. If we move down, the detail is a lot more subtle, but there still are individually sculpted scales if you move down the neck, although there are also a few scuffs. So the detail never really dissipates, but it just becomes more subtle, which is a great thing about this figure. However, there are a few things that aren't the best, like the seam lines, obviously, aren't really the best, especially the split right behind the neck. Now, I know this is kind of like, you know, a thing that comes with every single one of these figures, but I never am a fan of having the figure look like it just got split in half and put back together again. And as well as that, the small little things that help show off the hinges. Now, I know there's no real way around this, but, you know, it's something that no one really likes. Also, the belly detail here is not that impressive compared to the rest of it. It's really the top of the body that gets the most detail, such as this leg, which is really well detailed, but this part of the leg is not really well detailed. So consistently, the leg detail is rather inconsistent, and these little sculpted on things on the feet just look really bad. They look glued on. They're not good. And then there's the tail, which is great and well detailed. You can see all the little individually sculpted scales. It's very subtle, but it means a lot, and it is very well made. Probably the best part of the detail, along with the head. The head and tail are definitely the parts of the figure that excel the most in both paint job and detail, which is a good thing, but at the same time, I wish they had that much time and care into the rest of the body. But overall, the detail is not bad, and for a Mattel figure, it is really good. So for that, I'd give the detail a 7 out of 10. So overall, I'd say that the paint job is well applied in some areas, with some areas lacking. The posability on this figure is way better than most figures, but it still has its problems when it comes to stability. The articulation on the figure is a mixed bag, with some areas being very fun to pose and move around, and some areas being very frail and hard to pose around. And the detail is very good on the top of the figure, but at the bottom of the figure, it is way weaker, which is also something you could say about the paint job. So in conclusion, I give this figure a 7.5 out of 10. It is by far my favorite figure in my Mattel collection, and I know that can't be said for everyone, which is why I would like you guys to comment down what your favorite Mattel figure is in the comment section below, as well as that other figures I should review for the series. And see you guys next time.